Good morning, YouTube. Welcome back to Granted Gardens. My name is Melissa, and we are about a week after we got our entire gardens planted, and I'm going to show you just a few things that we're harvesting already. Now, I do want to make it very clear that we started all of our plants from seed indoors, probably back in March. So we did get a head start on a lot of stuff, which is why we're able to harvest so soon. But these are also some plants that if you purchase them from the store, already started for you, that you could be harvesting really early in the season as well. So first off is my lettuce. For many years, this has been one of my most favorite things to grow because you can pick from it really early on and it continues to produce for quite some time throughout the season. So I have my lettuce right now growing in my tower garden here. And so essentially what I can do is I can just come in, I can pick the leaves off a little bit at a time. Now the reason why I can do this is because these variety of lettuce that I have in here are something called cut and come again. So instead of growing a big head of lettuce that you would just take off and eat once, I just pick from the sides of the leaves and it continues to reproduce. So a downfall of that is that you're not getting your massive head of lettuce, right? That not like something that you'd be familiar with like iceberg lettuce or romaine lettuce at the grocery store, but you still get an abundance of lettuce. There really is no need to have that head. So to give you guys a close-up of what I mean by cut and come again, here we have one piece of lettuce, right? One lettuce plant that's growing out the side here. And essentially what I do is I just come in, you can use snips, but I typically just use my fingernails, and I'll find the larger leaves. So here you can see it's one of the larger ones, and I'll just go right to the base and I'll just pinch it off, okay? And then I harvest that. And as I do this, I'm going to do this to all of the larger leaves, being careful not to take off the very top of your lettuce. You want to make sure that you leave that crown so that it continues to produce. So I just come in and I take off all my larger leaves, ensuring that I leave this crown. And you can see up here we've got a lot of new growth happening, and then in a matter of a few days to a week, all of this is going to fill in again, and you can just come back and pick again. Now there are different varieties of cut and come again lettuces. As you can see in here, I've got some green and some purple, so it's fun to play around with. I like mixing up the colors just because I think it looks a lot prettier in the bowl. Another thing that I have going also in my tower garden here is kale. This is another thing that reproduces quite a bit. You can pick from it and is something that you can kind of start early in your garden and pick from early, because just like lettuce, kale can handle cooler temperatures. So you can actually get them out in your garden space a lot earlier than you can get things like tomatoes and peppers. The stalks of the kale are a little bit tougher than the bases of the lettuce here, so I did use snips. But I can go ahead and break this up and add this to my salad bowl, or I can use it in things like smoothies and green juice. I also like to pick my lettuce early in the morning or later in the afternoon. Usually earlier in the morning is best because they've had collected some dew or whatnot and have like rejuvenated themselves. They're not limpy leaves. You don't want to pick your lettuce in the heat of the day because a lot of times your leaves are going to be limpy and it's going to be rough on your plants. I try to get out here before the sun hits them too hard, so then pick from them in the morning. It's always the best bet. Now the reason why it's so important to try and start things like lettuce early in the year is because once the heat of the summer really starts to hit, the lettuce likes to do something called bolting. So this is kind of an example. It's probably a terrible example because I already picked it out of the green stalk, but usually you want your lettuce to look something like this, very bushy, right? Very bushy. Where this one you can see it compared is very tall and not quite as filled in. And the idea there is that the lettuce has decided that it's hot and that it's probably reaching the tail end of its life, and instead of producing things like yummy tasty leaves, it is going to put all of its energy into reproduction, which is when the shoot shoots up, and then out of the center here you start to see flowers. Okay, it's going to go into the flowering stage, and essentially those flowers will die off and dry out, and inside of them are lettuce seeds. So I usually try to let my lettuce go to seed so that I can collect some of the seeds. However, in this particular little container in the vertical garden, there was a second second lettuce seed that had germinated that wasn't doing quite as well because it was kind of getting pushed out by this one. And so I figured I would let that second one come to fruition and just pull this guy out. Another way that you can tell that your lettuce is either gone to seed or going to seed is that the leaves itself get really bitter. It doesn't taste really good anymore. So once it hits that stage, you really do want to pull it out. You can always replace it with something else, or you can try and direct sow more lettuce seeds in that space, unless you want to let it go all the way, and then you get a ton of free lettuce seeds, which is great as well. Another thing that you can really start picking from just about as soon as they pop back is your herbs. So I've been lucky enough to have quite a few of my herbs come back all by themselves this year. Sometimes that doesn't happen, and depending on what zone you're in, sometimes it's too cold for them to do that. But essentially, as soon as they start popping back, you can start picking from them. The rule of thumb that I always share with virtually anything is if you're nervous about over picking, just take a third. And so the concept behind that is that you take a third, you leave a third for the animals and the wildlife, and then you leave a third for the plant to be able to rejuvenate itself. So by just taking 1/3 of the plant, you're reassuring that there's enough for you, the local creatures, and enough of the plant to be able to rejuvenate itself and come back, and so that you can pick more. I'm kind of stuck in this state of limbo right now because we have some really special plans next week, and so I don't want to pick a bunch of stuff that really needs processed or a lot of handle time because I'm not gonna have time to do it. But here's just a couple examples of what I have available from an herb standpoint to be picking right now. So this here is my marjoram. You can see it is massive and full of life. And then back there, even though it doesn't really look any different, it is different. That is my oregano. So these are really easy to pick. The concept with picking herbs is that they grow on a kind of a stalk like this, right? So this marjoram here grows on this stalk. And as you can see at each kind of joint of the stalk, they've got 2 sets of leaves. So there's the 2 big outer leaves, so this one and this one, 2 big outer leaves, right? And then in the armpits and the joints there's another set of leaves entirely. So when you are harvesting your herbs, you want to make sure that you cut down to one of those joints. And I usually come up from the bottom about 3 or 4, again, to make sure that we're leaving enough there for it to rejuvenate itself. I mean, this is probably more than 4. And then I would just snip off right here. So essentially, this is what it looks like. You can go through and you can literally just hack at this and just take it right through the center. It's pretty hard to kill off at this point. And then usually what I do is I use my dehydrator to dry these out, but you can also hang them and dry them. And then you would just pick your oregano the same way. A lot of different herbs are that same way. I'm looking at lemon balm. Lemon balm is the same concept. Sage, basil, all of them. So my basil won't get quite this big, unfortunately. I wish it could, but it doesn't come back every year. These do. And so moving on, we're gonna go to one last thing that we've been picking quite a bit of recently. And that is our strawberries, which right now are the only thing in the backyard that are in full sun. So we'll make this a little quick. Yum. And just like that, it is 90-something degrees outside. That is why it is important to get out as early as possible in the mornings. So the strawberries are definitely something that you need to keep up on regularly because they will go from green to done like in a day. So we pick every single day. Our harvest has definitely been increasing, and we've also been letting those strawberries spread quite a bit over the years. But definitely a really fun treat to be picking from so early in the season. So that's basically what we've got going right now that we're picking and harvesting and eating on our property. What is this? The end of May, beginning of June-ish. So as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I look forward to sharing more with you soon.